Good morning, and thank you all for coming. We believed it was important to talk about this tolling issue to sort of set the facts from fiction. In the zeal to collect cash, I think folks get clouded when it comes to the facts of the matter. What's happening is, with tolls, there's a perception among the public that when you talk tolls, we're talking border tolls. Let's be 100% clear. Connecticut cannot have border tolls unless they're willing for the following: to repay federal funding from 1983 forward, to lose the gas tax revenue that we receive from the federal government, and also put in jeopardy the match that we get from the federal government for construction of highways. Currently, for every dollar of federal tax, we get $1.70 back from the federal government. That would be in jeopardy. So we can't have border tolls, and I think that's universally accepted. But I think the public has the feeling that you can have border tolls because when you talk about it, that's what the public talks about. That just cannot happen. What we can have, potentially, theoretically, hypothetically, we could have, is congestion pricing tolls that are located around the state. There was a study done back in 15 and 16 to take a look at these things. And when you take a look at, and the reason why that was done is to try to get into the pilot program to get the federal permission for Connecticut to go the next step on congestion tolls. The study is nowhere near definitive on whether or not these congestion tolls can raise any revenue for the state of Connecticut. I didn't say that. The DOT commissioner did. The studies are theoretical models based upon projections that have not been tested. And the way you test them is you do them through mathematical formulas. You have to look at different scenarios, the cost between New Jersey and Boston to figure out if the traffic would go north as opposed to south. How much would it be before people jump off the highway? How much would it be before the normal traveler would skip tolls and not go through tolls if you're just going to work so many miles away? All those things must be modeled out. And according to the commissioner, that modeling would take about roughly, and this is a number that no one's holding anybody to, would take millions of dollars to do that study and significant number of years to do that study. So we are a long, 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 long away from even determining whether or not money can come from tolls. So to argue that tolls is a panacea or a factor that we should be looking at is misleading the public at best. You know, Senator Murphy, when he was congressman, talked about raising the federal gas tax. And I called him up and I talked to his office saying that was crazy. But that's how I learned that we get the best return on federal gas tax money than virtually any other state. We're not the best, but we're up in the top tier. All that is in jeopardy if we do the border tolls, but more importantly, if we do the congestion tolls, the idea was that you have to set a price limit. And the study that was done used 10 cents a mile and 20 cents a mile. At 20 cents a mile, that's 4 times the highest rate in the country. At 10 cents a mile, it's double the highest rate in the country. Those are just numbers thrown out there. And no one looked at the impact of those numbers. And arguably, those are not the numbers that eventually would be used. So this is pie in the sky. And whether it's real or not, nobody knows. But if we're going to do this, we certainly should find the facts before we jump. So with that, I would ask Senator Witkos to be the next speaker.
Thank you. As Senator Fasano said, as you referred to the study in 2015, the study self-admits that it's a sketch-level study, not any in-depth analysis of the pros and cons and the costs of constructing tolls in the state of Connecticut. But what it did reveal to us was that we cannot have border tolls. The federal government would have to give permission for that. They have stated that they will not give permission to the state of Connecticut to construct border tolls. But contained within that study are 3 measures that we can toll. And I say to you that neither of those three measures are worthwhile, and people would not have it in the state of Connecticut, not for revenue purposes only. And those are price congestion tolling, where you may be charged a higher price to be on a highway between commuter hours to reduce your driving habits. Imagine having to pay an additional $5, $10, $15, $20 each way to go to and from work 5 days a week. I think people would be outraged in the state of Connecticut if that was an added cost on themselves and their families and the businesses that have to use our highways to get to and from their locations and do their businesses. The second is to add additional tolling lanes on existing highways. So imagine along the I-95 corridor where you have to add an additional lane north and southbound, and the properties that condemnation process would have to take in effect, basically eminent domain, taking these properties away from these homeowners to put in tolling lanes, only one tolling lane in each direction, and the costs surrounding that. And lastly is a site-specific tolling, where there's been conversations about the I-84 viaduct and the need for replacement. This would allow tolling in a close proximity to that specific project area. But the cost of establishing the infrastructure for the tolling, the years to pay that back, and then the years it would take to pay off that project are unsurmountable. So I think the message that I want to portray is that if there's a budget that has tolling revenue in it, it's a budget of smoke and mirrors, because it's not one of those three things that we want to experience here in the state of Connecticut. Senator Boucher.
Let me be clear. A toll is a tax. It's a tax on the most taxed public in the U.S.
Tony, you're too close to that mic. Thank you.
As you all know, we are losing businesses and people every week, every year. And this toll tax would actually impact 70% more of the Connecticut public than those that would be coming through our state. Congestion pricing would hit those at the middle to low income most, and it also would be a direct pay cut to their paycheck every week. This is a very bad idea. Other states that they point to that have a toll have income taxes that have deductibles on them. They don't have a car property tax. They don't tax pensions, Social Security. They don't tax gifts or inheritance. They don't tax real estate when they go out. As you can see, we do enough taxing. This just would exacerbate the problems that we already have. Quite frankly, people behind you have put forward a plan that is an alternative to taxing. And we plan to oppose, you know, I will be opposing this strongly as a chairman of the Transportation Committee, because it is a bad idea for Connecticut at a very bad time in our state.
I'd also like to introduce from the Connecticut Transit Motor Association of Connecticut, Joe Scully.
Good morning. I think that we've been having the wrong conversation about tolls in Connecticut. Public comments reference the billions of dollars of revenue that tolls would bring in, like toll revenue is just money that grows on trees. The fact is, most of this revenue will come out of the pockets of Connecticut residents and businesses. Commuters will pay twice per day. For trucks, even more than that. For the commuters that will pay twice per day, it gets worse. If they're getting home from work, they will pay higher prices for groceries, gasoline, and clothing purchased from the store. All these things are transported by truck. The tolls would be multiple times more expensive for trucks. So tolls, like other operating costs, are costs that truckers have no choice but to pass on to their customers. Accordingly, all consumers would pay more for everything in Connecticut, because if you bought it, a truck brought it. Connecticut residents have not been getting the full story. No state has ever done what these tolling bills are proposing to do, which is to convert an existing interstate highway corridor from a toll-free facility to a tolled facility. The tolling proposals are being sold as a way to reduce congestion. The only way they will reduce congestion is when the tolls are made too expensive so that drivers can't afford to drive on the roads. What that will mean is that significant traffic will be diverted onto local roads. We don't know where the tolls will be located. We don't know how much they would cost. There is no limit to potential toll increases. These increases could happen at a moment's notice. Connecticut businesses and residents already pay a lot of taxes and fees to use these highways, including diesel taxes, per gallon excise taxes, the petroleum gross receipts tax, registration fees, and more. Paying more to sit in the same traffic accomplishes nothing. In closing, please know that statements about out-of-state trucks using our roads for free are false. Last year, Connecticut netted nearly $30 million from out-of-state trucks. They pay fuel use taxes and apportioned registration fees for the privilege of operating in Connecticut. The trucking industry in Connecticut pays 36% of all highway user fees owed by motorists, despite accounting for only 6% of the miles traveled. So in closing, truckers, car drivers pay more than enough to use our highways. We need to stop this unprecedented proposal once and for all. Thank you.
And I'd like to introduce from the Yankee Institute, Carol Platt.
Good morning. Thank you to Senator Fasano for inviting us today and for his leadership on this issue. My name is Carol Platt Liebau, and I am the president of the Yankee Institute for Public Policy. We all believe that maintaining our infrastructure is vitally important to the success of our state. But before lawmakers demand 1 more cent from Connecticut's taxpayers, including through the use of tolls, we respectfully ask them first to ensure that they're spending the money we've already sent them wisely. Given our state's $5 billion deficit, we must spend taxpayer money on the things that we absolutely need, not on the things we want, no matter how badly we want them. Like so many families across Connecticut have already been forced to do, we must cut or delay further spending. This is no time to heap even greater burdens on the people of our state. Thank you.
The last thing I will mention with respect to the toll situation, some people have argued that that's the money necessary for our transportation projects. We have prioritized progress, which we have mentioned, and in our budget, we fully funded the transportation fund, and we put in prioritized progress, which will deliver $67+ billion in 30 years, which is enough to take care of what's on the list currently with DOT, and it funds the transportation projects in the future. So with that, if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.